The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome those joining us remotely and in person to the July 11th, 1:30 p.m. meeting of the Local Government Commission. We have people joining us by webinar and some here in person, and we welcome you all. We have our meeting agenda has been posted online, and I'd like to ask everyone to stand and join us for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Billy, you want to lead us? I'll do it. I salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the Old North State love, loyalty, and faith. Thank you all very much. We have a pledge of a conflict of interest statement. Members, you've seen and reviewed. Members, you've seen and seen and reviewed the agenda. Does anyone have a conflict or potential conflict of interest regarding any matters that are before us? Hearing none, I'll call on Cindy to call the roll and then go through a few housekeeping items.
Thank you. For the benefit of all listening in, they'll take attendance. Auditor Wood. Here. Mr. Toole, designee for Secretary Marshall.
Here.
And Mr. Edwards for Secretary Penny today.
Here.
Thank you, sir. He is participating virtually. Mr. Burns. For now, anyway. Mr. Butler.
He will be absent today.
Thank you. Absent today. And Ms. Harvey.
Here.
Hello. She is virtual today. And Councilwoman Hoffman.
Here.
Thank you. Also virtual, Mr. Philbeck.
Here.
Virtual, and Treasurer Falwell.
Here.
Here in person. And just quickly to expand on the housekeeping procedures for the public information, that the meeting proceedings are being recorded and will be made available to the public pursuant to our department's recorded meeting policy. If everyone will please remember to identify yourself when speaking and when making motions and seconds. Without objection, as we vote, all motions and seconds will be considered as a yes vote unless you indicate otherwise. If we lose our power or some audio connection, the meeting will continue, the broadcast will continue. If we have any changes to the agenda, they will be announced during the meeting. The members of the staff in attendance today are Sharon Edmondson, Secretary of the LGC, Jennifer Wimmer, Director of Debt Management, myself, Cindy Aiken, Counsel, Debbie Tomasco, Director of Technology Operations and Policy, and we have Joe Bickley operating our AV. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to entertaining a motion to approve the meeting minutes. Without objection, we'll combine these into one vote, June 6th and June 26th. The LGC meeting minutes and the LGC special meeting minutes, I presume, having to do with our budget meetings. Given that explanation, do I hear a motion to approve the June 6th and 26th meeting minutes?
So moved. State Auditor Beth Wood.
Second?
So moved. Bill Toole, Secretary of State.
Motion second being made. Any further discussion regarding that? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Edwards. Absent. Butler's absent. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
you. Ms. Councilwoman Hoffman,
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck,
Aye.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you all. In your reports on attachment A, you have pension and OPEB liability reports for units that are on the agenda. The Treasurer's Office put out a press release recently that aggregated the unfunded pension and healthcare liabilities of some of our, all of our local governments. And, but as we go through an agenda every time, we also put it on our, whoever's on the agenda has their report in there. That's an attachment A. Hearing no questions about that, we'll go to item number 5, debt approval request for the FDIC units, which is an attachment B.
This is Jennifer Wimmer. I'll be presenting the units that fall under this category. The first unit is Pender County. They are coming for approval of $178 million to issue general obligation bonds. The referendum was passed to provide funds for different school projects. They will not be issuing this all at once. However, the authorization is for the entire $178 million for a middle school, elementary school, some constructions of central services, and renovations.
Pender County did have an FPIC for 3 items. The first was that their audit was late. It was submitted January 25th, 2023. They had some budget violations in 3 non-major funds, and they also neglected to do their general ledger account reconciliations in a timely manner. The county did respond, found their response to be satisfactory. Pender has had, unfortunately, a long history of not having their audits done on time due to unfortunate hires and just extenuating circumstances with hurricanes and the like. This audit actually came in fairly close to the deadline compared to other years. And we have confirmed with their current auditor, which they changed firms for 2022, 2023 rather, sorry, that they have already done their preliminary field work and that the county is responding to their questions very promptly. And they said this is the best result they've seen with this county in some time. So they have also established new procedures to monitor the budget to actual reports, and they've hired a new internal audit compliance officer who is responsible for making sure the monthly reconciliations are processed timely. And we found the response to be acceptable and recommend this for approval. On the phone, we have David Andrews, the county manager, Meg Blue, the finance officer, and several other folks, including folks from Davenport and Bob Jessup on council. Anyone has questions for them?
Thank you all associated with Pender County for joining us today. This is the state treasurer, and I guess my first comment, my first question, Mr. Andrews, without being specific, without being, just give us a range of how many years you think this expenditure could take place.
I'm sorry, sir, would you repeat that last part of that question? I apologize.
I know we're approving all this at once, but I've spoken to the county chairwoman and who informed me that this would be staged over a period of years for the construction projects.
Yes, sir. I think we're probably looking at what, Meg, 5 years or so? Something like that.
Yes, the first would be the largest portion, the 111 million for the K-8 in the Scottsdale Topsail area. And then the next would be the Topsail Middle and the Burgaw Cafeteria, which would be, I believe, off the top of my head, about 28 of it. And then the remaining maintenance building and the 8-bay garage would be the last tranche of it for the 38 million.
And thank you, Meg. And Manager Andrews, this was put to the voters for a general obligation voter approved debt, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the margin, the for and again were about what percentage?
I believe 53 to 47, just rounding a little bit.
That's a pretty tight margin for a school bond. At least that's been my experience. What would you attribute that margin to?
I think overall, generally speaking, I've been with Kendall County for a little over 10 months. I've been over 30 years in municipal government. Came up as a CFO. I would attribute it basically, Pender County is transitioning from rural and agriculture more to a tourism-based economy. We have a lot of growth going on over on the east side, but I would still say that there are a lot of lower income households overall. But I think that the median household income is definitely going up due to the growth in Topsail Beach and Silver City and Hampstead.
So you're saying it wasn't, the margin was not a result of something in this bond project schedule that was highly controversial?
No, sir, not at all. I think that there's a community-wide, I think there's a really good, understanding that with the growth that's happening on the east side in the, particularly in the Hampstead area, schools are reaching capacity, and this is a very much needed capital project. I think that there's a good understanding countywide the need to do it. I think it's just, whether people want to pay a little bit more taxes or not,
And tax rates, where are you on tax rates, valuation, and the revals?
Okay, so just roughly our tax rate was at 64 cents on June the 19th. The board went up by 9.25 cents, with all that dedicated 100% to debt service for the schools. And we are, and also last night we had our meeting July the 10th, and the board gave the green light to start the reval process. And we believe that our current valuations are somewhere close to 35 to 40% undervalued. So we believe that once we get the reval done, that there's going to be even more significant, revenue capacity in the budget.
So the tax rate, this is the kind of calls I'm getting, so I'm sort of asking on behalf of other people. So the tax rate went up 9 pennies on 64 pennies.
Yes, sir. There were two options that Davenport laid out for us. One was to increase the tax rate with each bond issuance, those 3 bond issuances that Meg spoke about earlier, and that would have resulted in a tax rate increase of a little over 14 cents. And but if we did it all at once and built some reserves, then we could, avoid increasing the tax rate by another 5 cents. So the board opted to go up by 9.25 cents effective July 1.
Okay, and lastly, on the reval, you gave the impression that properties were potentially 30 to 40% undervalued, and that would result in even more revenue. But did you really mean to put all that together in one sentence? If it's supposed to be revenue neutral?
if we would have, of course, it's going to take 2 years to do the reval. I'd say if we had done the reval sooner, then, you know, there's a good chance we might not have needed to increase the tax rate. I'm not sure, but when we were putting all this together, at that time, we were getting through the bonds and really weren't contemplating the reval or not. But I think when we get to that point, then the board would more than likely look at, you know, what our revenue needs are. And I couldn't say with 100% certainty, but they may be able to reduce the rate, to whatever revenues we need. But right now, we think we're leaving, what did we say the other day, Nick, about 24 million a year?
Based on the current.
Based on the current valuation
And tax rate.
and tax rate.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to open up to other questions. Just a comment. It's been publicized that you're in negotiations to sell your hospital. And I'm just asking you in a public meeting, Mr. Andrews, that you would be radically hospitable to any questions that you might get from any LGC staff or any LGC member regarding the sale of that hospital, any covenants that may exist, any promises that were made, because oftentimes people will not come to you directly to get their questions answered. They'll come to us and ask us to ask the questions. So would like to hear your commitment, David, this afternoon, that as these questions start coming regarding this sale of your hospital to Novant, that you'll be answering them quickly and forthrightly.
Oh, yes, sir, absolutely.
Thank you. Any questions from the members?
I do.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
State Auditor Beth Wood. So, and I'm not sure this is for LGC staff or the county staff, but of the 3 issues that they had in the from their audit reports, or the 3 issues that put them on this FPIC, it's the general ledger account reconciliations not being done timely. So are y'all telling me that as of June 2022, all of them are complete and reconciled back to the journal ledger?
Yes. Largely that was the main one they're referring to in that instance is our tax reconciliation, which has been problematic since the implementation of a new tax system, which began prior to my arrival, but we have now gotten it down to a science and everything is rolling smoothly and accordingly. So yes, those are done monthly by the end of the following month. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from board members? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Tool. Thank you, Mr. Tool. Do I hear a second? Nancy Hoffman, second. Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
For the Pender County matter, that's motion Tool, second Hoffman. Auditor Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Edwards,
Aye.
thank you. Ms. Harvey,
Abstain.
Mr. Philbeck,
Aye.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Harvey, is there a reason for your abstention that you would wish to state?
The aforementioned hospital sale that you mentioned, Mr. Treasurer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and Pender County, thank you, and best of luck. Next is,
Appreciate it.
next is Transylvania County.
Transylvania County is coming for approval of a $5.5 million installment purchase to construct and equip a emergency medical services base station in the county. They have the construction bids and costs are defined and known. and I'll turn it over to Sharon.
Thanks, Jennifer. Transylvania County did have two FPIC items. The first is that their audit was late. It was submitted on March 14th, 2023. And the second is that they had some material weaknesses in internal control or significant deficiencies. They had a significant deficiency for late filing of required monthly and quarterly reports to their grantors. The county did respond satisfactory to the FPIC items. The audit was late in part because the 2021 audit was late. That's a typo there in your documentation. So they were late to started on 22, and they also had implementation issues with GASB 87. Heard quite a bit about last year. They have worked with staff and implemented software for tracking and calculating the liabilities related to leases, which is the GASB 87 issue. And hopefully that will carry over for them with the Sabita arrangements, which has to be implemented this year. It's very similar to the lease accounting. County also has entered into an agreement with the Land and Sky Regional Council and the Association of County Commissioners for some additional support and resources related to their grant. Again, we found the response to be satisfactory, and we'll recommend their item. On the phone, we have County Manager James Lauder and David Cheatwood and Tezo Havelston from First Try. My apologies.
Okay. This is Jamie, this is Treasurer Falwell. Your county offices are off 74.
Off 64, sir.
I mean 64, up on the left, sort of up on the hill a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the last time I was there, your executive assistant was retiring with 40 years, if I remember that correctly.
Yes, yes. Very much missed.
I left her a note, said I wasn't going to approve her retirement, but I don't guess she didn't pay me any mind. So
Well,
if you see
she
her,
hesitated.
all right. You see her, tell her I was asking about her and said hello.
I will. Thank you.
It's Transylvania County where we were having some controversy about parks and buildings, and that the county next, the Henderson County. Not ringing a bell.
I believe that's our neighbor.
Good answer. All right. Any questions from any board members? Hearing none, the clerk, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So approved. So, State Auditor Beth Wood.
Okay. Ms. Hoffman's a second, if that's okay, Ms. Hoffman. And that's the base motion. Alter Wood, any further discussion regarding Transylvania County? Hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Transylvania County Financing, motion Wood, second Hoffman. Mr. Toole.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Burns and Butler are still absent. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Treasurer Falwell.
Aye. We're now moving into our consent agenda. Does any member wish to have any of the items on the consent agenda to be pulled for individual discussion? Okay. Hearing no objection. Hearing no desire to have any items pulled, do I hear a motion to approve consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda, Nancy Henderson.
A second.
Second. Alder Wood.
Motion second being made. Any further discussion? The hearing none, the clerk will call the roll.
Today's consent agenda starts with Asheville Housing Authority, goes through the Gastonia Housing miscellaneous action item. Hoffman Wood, Mr. Toole.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Treasurer Falwell. All right, thank you.
What's next? Jennifer?
The miscellaneous non-action items that are presented just for information, no vote. Charlotte Mecklenburg Hospital Authority, they are redoing some of their bond language to switch from the LIBOR to SOFR rates in their documents. And in Libyan Housing, which is the Charlotte Housing Authority, they are switching the construction lender from Deutsche Bank to Truist. With that, the maturity date will be December 31, 2044, and the not to exceed rate is still 12%.
All right. Does anybody have any questions about that? Jennifer, at some point, I'd like the board to be updated. These interest rate swaps and reverse swaps that Atrium had this board approve over the last several years. I'm just very curious with the generational increase in interest rates, how those things actually performed in relation to what the reason they put them on the books to start with. They were. All right, we have a motion, a second on the table, right? Oh, we're done. Now we've got updates.
All right, this is attachment D, unit updates. Before I get into that, I would like to introduce our new interim director of fiscal management, Kendra Boyle. And starting next month, she's going to be up here on the hot seat, so I'll be supporting her, of course, but I did want to introduce her to everybody today.
Thank you, Kendra.
All right, our unit updates, we only have one item to vote on for Eureka and two for Robertsonville. The rest of these are just fairly routine updates. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to try and answer those. The resolution for Eureka is to modify the appointment of a deputy finance officer and account signatories for the town. We're removing Kendra as an account signatory and adding Eric Faust as a deputy finance officer and account signatory. It also retains Michael Milam and Antonio Edmondson as finance officer and assistant finance officer, but those also are signatories. Over in for Robertsonville, we have two resolutions. Both of these are to accept DEQ grant funding offers. The first is a viable utility reserve grant funded from the American Rescue Plan for $506,765 for water system improvements. And the second one also is an ARP-funded plan through DEQ for $6 million for wastewater treatment plant improvements. We have two resolutions there to vote on or to do those separately. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Sharon? Hearing none, we'll go to our next item, which is,
Mr. Treasurer, we need a vote on those three
excuse.
items.
before we vote on the resolutions, did you go to Eureka yesterday?
Thursday.
Let me go. Staff's going down to visit Eureka and Fremont regarding some concerns about the increase charges for sewage system, as it relates to Eureka, Fremont, and Goldsboro utilities. So look forward to that update. I entertain,
Sorry, say that again.
look forward to that update.
Before that, they're going to Eureka.
They're going,
Fremont.
Meeting with the board in Fremont.
Fremont is trying to increase the sewage intake rates that Eureka's charging, which we're forward. And then Fremont, any excess capacity they have, they get serviced by the city of Goldsboro. So,
And you're going Thursday. Who's going? One, both of y'all need to talk to me before you go. Please.
and there's several things I've asked them to do when they're down there, but one is I want to see meters. We have all these cities that this is just a random example. Say they're buying water from someone else. They're getting charged for 10,000 gallons of water, but they're only able to charge their customers for 6,000 gallons of water. And the same way on the other end. And there's no way that you can get ahead when you're paying this amount of water and you're only charging for this amount of water. So I've just keyed in on, it's just a motorcycle trade, I guess. I've just keyed in on where are the meters that actually measure this stuff, and do they work, and are they accurate? Because you can't manage what you can't measure. If these meters aren't properly measuring what's going on, then we got a problem. Water side, we have problems with the holes at the bottom of the pipe. And on the sewer side, we have problems with holes at the top of the pipe where rainwater comes in. These little towns get charged for processing rainwater. So it's just so they'll be visualizing that. They'll be glad to see you before you leave, before they go. So here a motion or second to approve.
So moved, Arterwood.
Second, Philbeck.
Thank you. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
To be clear, I believe you're voting on the Eureka resolution and two Robertsonville resolutions all at once. Wood and Philbeck. Okay. Mr. Toole.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Thanks. Councilwoman. Stockton. Sorry. Thanks. Sorry, I skipped you. Ms. Hart.
Aye.
Thank you. Treasurer Falwell.
Aye.
Thank you.
We're now into our discussion for rules for the certification mutual fund for local government investment. Jason, if you want to
Thank
come
you,
up,
Mr.
and
Treasurer.
Laura, you're welcome to come up and sit also.
Just to start out, thank you, Mr. Treasurer, with sort of where we're at in the process, because this has been a fairly long process. We had brought proposed text for these rules changes to you back in March of 2023 that you voted to approve the proposed text of the changes. Following those proposed text changes, those changes were subject to a 60-day public comment period. We posted those proposed changes for the 60 days and received 2 letters. We've since reviewed those letters, and what you have in your packet is the letters with our embedded comments responding to whether we felt they were appropriate to, they rose to the level of us proposing a change or not. And also in your packet is a resolution that, if you agree with what we're presented to you today, you'll vote to adopt these as the modified rules. Actually, the resolution is to repeal rules and adopt new rules. If you do vote on these today, the next step would be to submit them to RRC for their review to continue through the process with the rules changes. Laura, any other comments on the process in general from here?
That RRC meeting will be in August, and so if everything went through, we'd have an effective date of September 1st.
So the first thing to get us there, hopefully, is we just want to present you with the changes. We are proposing some changes to the proposed text. So proposed changes to proposed text based on the 2 letters that we received. So wanted to highlight some of the comments that were received and how staff has responded. And again, just to acknowledge everybody who's been part of this, our LGC staff, Cindy Aiken and I have been working on this, but have had a lot of support from Jason Sass from our investment management division, Laura Rowe as our DST rules coordinator, and also have had some input and support from Secretary of State's office from their securities division. So we really appreciate everyone's help. These were substantial changes and complex changes. So just to highlight a few of the comments that were made in the letters and staff's response to those. And the first letter I'm looking at is the letter from Capital Management of the Carolinas addressed to Ms. Rowe. And number 3 of their comments, they suggested that the commission consider requesting a list of the fund's holdings. Staff did felt that this was a positive addition to the changes and suggested changes to those proposed text to include that holdings would be required. Number 4 in their comments, there was concern that enforcement event was overly broad, and there were a number. Staff agreed with that as well. The concern in it being overly broad is that the ability of the funds to attest that there were no actions, describe them, it could catch up those funds and actions that might not be necessarily impactful to the operations or the outcome for those funds. So we took a look at how we were identifying the events that had to be reported, and also added some additional language to make it clear that the commission would be looking for items that would have a materially adverse effect on the fund or on the interests of the participants. So if it was merely an administrative action, that wouldn't necessarily preclude them from attesting that there was no action. And Jason, please jump in anytime to clarify anything. I think that was one of the more substantial changes throughout, just clarifying what the commission would be looking for. That, I think probably that was the shorter of the 2 letters.
Introduce Jason and Laura.
We did.
Okay.
And the other letter that we received, any questions on those 2 changes that were suggested and how staff responded? Again, we felt they were good additions or changes to the proposed text. In the second letter, there was
Objection to those changes?
any objection?
To those changes?
Do members have any objections?
So were there any objections?
These are changes that we've made as a result of the letters we received in public comment. So these are the first that these proposed changes are being presented.
So these were suggestions that were made and we've incorporated this.
Correct, yes. These letters were submitted as a result of the public comment period. So we have the proposed text. Now we're making proposed changes to the proposed text. In the second letter, there was a suggestion to provide a list of indexes from which funds would be required to select their benchmark index, and also a suggestion that the benchmark be objective based on similar investment parameters, and that it be unaffiliated with the applicable manager. Staff felt that publishing a list of appropriate benchmarks could be something that could be operationalized if we felt it was beneficial to the participants, but didn't feel it rose to the level of being included as a rule. And also it could be a fairly heavy lift to do so, and fair and accurate through that publication.
The concern was by making it a requirement, it binds any potential certified fund, and it increases the need for the LGC to really stay on top of current practice in the field to make sure that that list was continuing to be appropriate for every mutual fund that is eligible for certification.
So although we didn't change our proposed text to require the list, we did agree with the suggestion to require them to be objective based on investment parameters and to be independent of the unaffiliated with the manager. So that suggestion regarding the benchmark was incorporated into the proposed text. A later point made brings back the idea of ensuring that any events that would have to be reported were, in the word, essentially rose to the level of being materially, have a materially adverse impact on either the fund or its participants. So I think the concern there, again, was that it could be overly broad. And again, the same changes I mentioned before would address this letter, that those events would be overly broad and potentially prevent the funds or the managers from attesting during those annual certifications. I think, again, there were some other changes. I think this was probably the biggest item of concern broadly across both letters, was making sure that that event reporting didn't inadvertently trip up any funds because they were overly broad or didn't, again, rise to the level of having materially adverse impact on the fund or the participant. So you have the, trying to see if there's anything. The local office, thank you. That local, the other, for the most part, we felt that a lot of the suggestions in the letter were extremely valuable, and we did incorporate. I think the only two that we did not, at some level, address were the one I just mentioned with the benchmark, the published list of benchmarks, and the other, there was a letter to recommend that in the letter, there was a suggestion that the local fund, that a local office be retained by the fund. And again, Mr. Toole, if you remember, the commission directed staff at one of our earlier meetings to remove that because we felt it didn't rise to the level of a need under the rules to have that local staff, that local office, but instead that it could be a benefit to that fund to have that office locally. So that is one suggestion that staff has recommended we continue to not include in the rules, which is that the fund need to have a local office. So other than that, I think a lot of the suggestions we found very valuable that really improved the proposed text. And so the full content of those letters is there for you, as well as our comments with references to the rules, the rule text that was changed as a result of those letters. So if there are any questions, we're happy to answer those on any of the changes made or the rules themselves. And Mr. Treasurer, I should note that Lee Carter and Jay Rivers from the North Carolina Capital Management Trust are with us here as well.
Any questions from board members? Cindy?
This is Cindy Aiken. Debbie, Jason, just want to mention that we added a little more disclosure required on a fund that did not intend to operate as a money market fund.
The clarification and the definition.
We added a disclosure requirement that if you're not seeking to maintain the stable $1 net asset value, that's prominently disclosed.
Right.
Disclosed.
So we added a requirement that in marketing materials for any certified mutual fund that is not a money market fund, which seeks to have a $1 NAV per share, that that be stated in those marketing materials. And likewise, for all certified mutual funds and money market mutual funds, we added the requirement that any such marketing materials also state that the investments that are allowed are those within the restrictions provided in our statutes, specifically the General Statutes 159-30C8, which is the statute providing the LGC with the authority to certify funds that we're discussing today. These staff felt also helped to address the concerns of the LGC that do what we can to help make sure that local units can understand what they're getting into and that their interests are protected while also allowing them to proceed with any of the investments that we allow here.
I believe that addresses a concern that several of the commissioners raised last time, just ensuring that the units had as much information as they could as they made these decisions to invest or not in these funds. And the LGC had the information to decide whether or not to certify these funds. So.
Okay, any questions from those joining us virtually?
I have one.
Alderman Wood.
So I was just looking at, so in all that you said, and I guess this may or may not be in the rules, but talk about the suggestion about operationally more monitoring.
More monitoring of the fund. So what we'll have here is what the rules, the proposed rules will
because of more than just the NCMT.
Right.
Because the situation exists that people could be investing things they probably shouldn't be. So, or things, people would be putting up things that maybe are not.
Right. So to Jason's point before, the restrictions are still in statute with regards to what any mutual fund certified by the LGC can invest in. We will have the annual, in the current rules, there was a 5-year certification, and obviously that fund had to ensure they still complied with all the statutes. In our proposed rules, there will be an annual attestation that those funds have to make that they are complying. And obviously we would want to verify those. And honestly, the very next step that we've talked about is laying out internally the procedure for what this looks like, what has to be reviewed, what boxes have to be checked if we get an application for certification. So
tell me you're not going to just depend on an attestation.
Yeah. No.
So the LGC will be doing some work to verify those attestations are.
We'll put in an underlying procedure to back up these rules where that staff will comply with too, and we'll discuss internally what that means. How are those things verified? How should they be verified, and make sure that those boxes are checked? And we'll do that through a formal departmental procedure that staff will follow.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Just to remind the audience that Capital Management Trust has had this business or contract, I guess, since the mid-'80s, early '80s.
82.
And we see several letters in here from you to us and Laura, to Jason and staff. It's not a public comment section, but do you feel like that your letters were received and acknowledged and
Incorporated.
sorry? All good. All good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for working with us as the person who's had it for half a century. So, does this require a vote?
Yes, there's a resolution. And one point to follow up, Mr. Treasurer, if I may, as Laura noted, the effective date would be September 1st if all goes well, and we have no issues through the process with RRC, but we will work to ensure that there's no disruption in certification of a mutual fund in the meantime. So, we're working closely with the rules process. So even if we adopt this, if the commission adopts this resolution and there's any kind of disruption, we'll ensure that there's no disruption to the local governments with regards to their ability to invest in a certified mutual fund. So, but we do have a resolution, Mr. Treasurer, resolution repealing rules and adopting proposed new rules in 20 NCAC 03, section 0700.
Also move and thank the staff for their hard work on this, because I know it was a long process, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We have a motion. Do we hear a second?
Second, Ms. Harvey.
Motion second being made. Any further discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
On the resolution to repeal the current rules and adopt proposed rules for our Title 20, Chapter 3, Section 700, Mutual Fund Rules. Tool and Harvey, Auditor Wood.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Two absent. Councilwoman Hoffman.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Philbeck
Aye.
and Treasurer Falwell.
All right. I also want to echo what Mr. Toole said, to thank staff for making this happen. We do have a guest here today from TBJ, and I'll be here on any topic, but is there one in specific we want to make? We want to make our team available to you for questions afterwards. Is there one in specific?
Nothing specific.
Okay. Sometimes it's one thing or another. All right. Welcome. With that, we'll go into an overview of Session Law 2023-59, an act to increase compliance by counties and municipalities that failed to timely submit an annual audit review. I've agreed to put this on the agenda as long as Debbie will talk 40 miles an hour, not 80 miles an hour.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. So,
I wasn't asking for a thank you, I was asking for a yes.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. On her behalf occasionally is that we hope this is a law that never gets used, because that would mean elected officials are doing their jobs. So as it relates to us taking using of money for a service that the local elected officials should have done on their own, make sure when you get to those points, just slow it down so that we can all understand.
And the issue is simple. Just do what the law says, which is get your annual audit done by the designated time with the time designated, and this will never come into play. Never come into play. But the other piece of the day is that Spring Lake is a prime example. Had their audits been done timely, they would not have been in this situation where they had $474,000 embezzled. All it took was their audit being on time. So again, this is really to help the citizens living in these communities, not to penalize anybody.
Thank you. And I don't know how much longer Jason and Laurie will be here, but I want to thank you all both for
Thank you, Mr.
they
Treasurer.
wanted a standing ovation.
I did just want to highlight for everyone's benefit, just some of the bigger takeaways from the law. And this obviously won't be the last time we come before you with this as we work to implement it. But I really wanted to highlight just some of the new authority or responsibility that the commission will have under this law. So it's fairly sequential as you look at how a year will roll out essentially. So at 9 months after fiscal year end, and just to be clear, this only applies to counties and municipalities. So the law is specifically written, and there is a copy of the session law in your packet for you, but it applies to counties and municipalities only. So again, Mr. Treasurer, we as staff, we've also gotten a number of questions and calls about this. So, and one of the first questions is who it applies to. So this does just apply to counties and municipalities. Those counties and municipalities that don't have an audit in 9 months after fiscal year end. And for all counties and all municipalities, their fiscal year end is June 30th. So 9 months after fiscal year end would be essentially April 1st. At that point, the LGC would notify them that they are 9 months, their audit's not in, and it's 9 months after fiscal year end. And another little trip up point is this isn't 9 months, quote, late. The audit report due date is October 31st. So this isn't that they're 9 months late. It's 9 months after their fiscal year end. So that would be at April 1st. The LGC would have to notify these counties and municipalities that their audit is not yet in. And that essentially that they've given consent to withholding a portion of their sales tax distributions. So basically it's a notice letter at 9 months. At that point, the county or municipality may appeal that pending action, essentially, by notifying the secretary. So as soon as those notices go out, and the commission has 30 days to send those notices, the county or municipality may appeal that pending action. At 12 months after fiscal year end, so essentially July 1st, if the county or municipality has not appealed, or they've appealed and it has not been successful, the commission then may direct the Department of Revenue to withhold a portion of that county's or municipality's sales tax revenue in an amount of 150% of the cost of the last annual audit on file. So one of the things that's really helpful with this is we do have a web page on our website that has the audit fees for all the counties and municipalities. So it's easy for anybody who's curious to see what that cost might be. So for instance, obviously if a audit was $40,000, that means $60,000 could be withheld for that unit. That amount is withheld in portions up to 5% of essentially what's their monthly budget. So 1/12 of 5% is withheld from those monthly distributions from the Department of Revenue until that maximum is reached, that 150% of the audit cost is reached. The money is returned to the unit in all cases. And it's returned at one of two times, either one, when the audit is submitted, or two, when it's been 2 years since the notification was given. So the money after those funds withheld after either 2 years or when the audit report is submitted will be returned to the unit, will be released to the unit. So that is at a high level what this law requires. One of the first things the commission members, you'll be seeing from this, from staff, is guidelines for appeal. The law requires that the commission develop guidance on what would constitute a successful appeal by a county or municipality to this proposed action. And I'm looking to bring that to you in September because I think one of the biggest questions we will get and will continue to get is, will this apply to me? What do I need to do to appeal? And we want to provide that clarity up front, what the commission feels would be the basis for a successful appeal. So from how this will roll out, how we're looking at rolling this out or implementing this law, the first thing we'll be bringing you is those guidelines for you to adopt, for you to basically adopt a resolution with those, showing what the basis for a successful appeal would be. And then we'll obviously, as staff, be operationalizing it in the spring with the first notices going out in April 1st. And any actions, should they be taken to withhold sales tax, would occur after July 1st.
What's the effective date of the law?
The effective date is for audit reports due on or after June 30th of 2023. So it's audit reports that will start coming into us shortly. So the first time this will be operationalized, that this will be effective, is we'll start rolling this out in spring of 2024.
And if you
how many, well, so it's 100 and then 547 as far as cities, right? So 647 units that this could apply to, 100 counties.
552 municipalities and 100 counties, yep.
So historically, how many dozens of those do you think would get a letter like this on April 1st next year?
So the total notices that would have gone out to municipalities in 2020 was 72. 2021, I'm saying fiscal year 2021, just to be clear. So in looking at fiscal year 2020 audits, the number that weren't in by April 1st of 2021, 72 municipalities would have received notices.
15%.
In fiscal year 2021, 78 units would have received notices. And this year, we would have had 104 municipalities. Those were all municipalities. For counties, it would have been 13 notices for fiscal year 2020, 8 notices for fiscal year 2021, and 13 notices for fiscal year 2022.
And how many of them get cured? Fast forward April, just fast forward next year. Typically speaking, the large majority of those get cured in the time that the law allows.
So looking again at who would this have applied to, so whose audit was not in by July 1st, essentially, is what we're looking at. For 2020, there were 40 municipalities that either were not in by July 1st of that following year or are still not in. There are 53 in fiscal year 2021 and 70 in fiscal year 2020.
Pitiful.
Now, some,
Mr. Philback?
I'm sorry, I should have been muted. I said that's pitiful. I'm sorry.
I agree with you, Mr. Philbeck. It's unbelievable.
And Debbie, this is per audit year.
per audit year, yes.
So if I'm late a second year,
Those are cumulative, correct. So we're once, right, because as we all know, if somebody's missing, and for example, we have, I believe, 4 units that are still missing 2020, 21, and 22. So as soon as you're missing 2020, you're obviously missing 2021 and 22. So fair point that they are cumulative. If somebody is missing 2020, they don't have 21 or 22. If they're missing 21, they don't have 22s.
and I would assume that while I know this is law, the LGC will be sending to all units notification of this law.
We will definitely, we can post a blog. That's one of our biggest reaches. We last to several thousand folks, and we'll put it on our website, and we'll make sure folks are aware of it. One of the other things we're doing, Auditor Wood, is we will be putting on our website what's essentially the information I have here, which will show for every unit the date that they've submitted or haven't submitted their audit. So it'll be very easy for units or their citizens, counties or municipality citizens, to go out and see what the trend is for their local government, and if they're late or could be approaching the dates that are called out in the law.
But I guess the point being is that June 30 has just ended.
Yes.
And between now and April is a lot of time to get your act together, get your audit in the door by April 1. Might still be late, given the 10/31 deadline. But I was just thinking if units across the state were notified that this law is in place, whatever the grapevine is, the League of Municipalities and the Association of County Commissioners would help get that word out, then the fact that, oh, I didn't know, won't be an excuse used next summer.
We will work to do that, absolutely. We'll work to do that on our own, and then working with partners we'll do that as well. So,
and again, I think the league and the association owe it to their members to help them not make this get used.
Is it fair to say that the league and the county commissioners were lobbying against this passage?
Yes. Sorry. I sat with it.
So should we really be depending on them to be our parent?
Well, now that it's done, you would hope they would do everything they could to prevent their members from falling into this category.
I hope I wasn't gonna eat that whole bowl of popcorn today, if that didn't happen, so. I don't think we can rely on hope. I mean, I just think that we need to have our own sheet.
I agree, but that wasn't what I heard y'all were gonna do, so I was hoping that somebody else was gonna get the word out.
Well, we got the interns here for a few more weeks. Why don't we just get them to start putting some envelopes together? So that
We have email addresses for, county and city managers, for the finance officers, for the governing boards. And I think proactively blanketing folks with the message we can definitely work on that. And obviously, once it comes to notice time, we'll make sure that everyone's aware too. If they have, we don't want to get to that point, but if they do get the notice, that we're sure that everyone's properly notified. But we'll make sure we do it a big reach early and often with as much as we can. Because quite honestly, I think one of the things too is making sure that we have gotten a lot of calls and questions, and mostly it wasn't a correct understanding of what the law meant or did. And I think part of that too is making sure that everybody understands what the law is actually doing or not doing. So I think that's important too, because there are a lot of folks unclear.
Two things, your governing board, because city manager's getting a notice like this, finance officer getting a notice like this. If I was taking money, my governing board would never see it. And if I was preventing the audit, my governing board would never see it, which again was the issue in Spring Lake. The other thing I would say is if you'll go back and transcribe from this recorded exactly what you just said and put it in a memo, it was so clear and concise and succinct. I followed it beautiful. And I think that to try and put the law, give them the law, but to lay out the sequence of things like you just did would be so helpful to so many of the governing boards around the state, because I have heard legislators who I was sure read the law miss the fact that they get it back in 2 years or when they submit their audit. And then, not knowing what the amount was going to be, and it was going to get withheld forever. And it's all right there in the law. So if you would do your, sequencing and take out all the verbiage around that sequencing, I think it would be easy for those who are charged with governance to follow.
So would East Laurinburg have ever gotten their money back? Huh? In 2 years.
However, we'd have been withholding the year before, the year after, and the year after, and the year after that they did have audit reports done.
All right. So they would, at a maximum, always be out 2 years.
No. Yes. The maximum would always be out at 2 years. Because then I'll give them back this year and take another year. I'll give them back this year and take another year.
Yeah. What else?
That's all.
Right,
Is there any
so,
other questions?
Did I say that right, Debbie?
I believe so. And it's also within the purview of the commission. It is that the commission may withhold as opposed to shall withhold. So if there were a point where for some reason it got cumulative and it was just overwhelming on a unit, the commission could decide, that it was, that they were going to hold off.
No, I was going to say there might be some other actions like losing their charter, because again, if you just continually year after year after year after year don't get your audit done. I just keep going back to Spring Lake, that he just had their audit done.
So, yes, Cindy.
This is Cindy. I was just going to say, I think it was also lost on people that if they're not being, the amount is not being withheld all at once, as you said. Every quarter, it's only a percentage.
Every month.
5%.
5%.
Their what is due.
Right, up to the maximum.
So are we ever taking people's money and writing a check to an auditor to do an audit? Yes or no?
No, it's only withheld and until the audit is submitted. And if, again, to Cindy's point of the monthly withholding, if there is some timing issues here, because obviously we can't stop this. DOR has to be notified. They have to get it into their process too. But let's say it took 6 months of withholding to get to that 150% of the audit cost, and the audit came in on month 1, then obviously the withholding would be notified to be stopped as well. So it's not that the full amount is necessarily always going to be withheld either. So, but no, a check, Mr. Treasurer, will never be written to anyone from the money doesn't come to the Department of State Treasurer, doesn't come to LGC. It's just not being distributed by Department of Revenue.
What about the list of approved auditors? Where's that come into play?
There is no list of approved auditors. Senate bill, I believe it was 473 with when the auditor issues an investigative report with findings, then the commission has the authority to have the unit choose from a list of auditors that the commission provides. That's totally separate from this, but that is a separate law, and
There's another law with Representative Winslow looking at a list of approved auditors.
Anything else in that regard? Any questions from those that are joining us remotely?
Let me clarify. Why I said pitiful was it was more cities and counties than I would have thought. But I guess the reason I thought that was because all the LGC itself generally hears about are the ones that are before us to borrow money. And apparently there are a lot of the others that are not doing their audits as well. That's why the number hit me as a little bit astounding. But it seems to me, frankly, to be a pretty mild law considering the importance of audits. And I do agree with the auditor that the governing boards probably ought to be made aware that that's a part of their policy making thing, is to make sure that their staff is doing what their staff is supposed to do. That's just my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Philbeck. And the reason I mentioned interns is, we're just talking about a few dozen letters here. I won't name anybody in particular, but we would send these pension spiking bills out of upstairs for some respects superintendents who spiked their salaries the last 4 years of their service. It resulted in $800,000 worth of pension spiking cost, and the board never saw it. The superintendent would get the pension spiking letter and throw it away, and then they retire. Then we'd send the board a bill. The bill board wants to know what's this bill coming from. They said, we've never seen this before. So I just think that let's get our FAQs, let's have clarity of thought and put things in the right sequence on our FAQs, and let's just make sure that we, at least on this first run, send not just emails, but a letter to somebody that we can honestly say they got this information.
And the other thing I would ask is that we use the resources of the interns when we get these return to sender, that we investigate where it should have gone and get them there. I know it's not supposedly our job, but at the same time, that's the very ones that need to be reading it, or those that the addresses are not correct.
Cindy
again, and we need to be cognizant that this is a municipal election year, is it not? So there might be some changes in after November. So we should think about what we send and when and to whom.
But whatever the changes are, if you address it to the mayor of.
That's true.
Well, I mean, if we send it now and then.
Good point. I don't mind sending it the second week in December. That's when they're all sworn. Because, Mayor Brown of Robersonville, when she first came before this group, she said she was unaware when she was running for office that this was even going on. So
that's a good point.
That's
both and. That's my philosophy.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Driving speed limits.
Good.
Next, presentation on the status of Spring Lake.
David Irwin is going to walk through a brief presentation on the current status of the town of Spring Lake. Got a copy of his slides.
David, if you could give us 1 second, we want to see if we can share the slides on the screens and with those participating virtually. Joa, are you?
It's grayed out.
Oh, hang on. All right, I'm gonna, oh, you got it?
I have it up here, but not
Let me
shared
make you
yet.
center, see if that works.
There we go.
Okay, let's just give that a minute. Let's make sure it comes up on the. Are you sharing? Ms. Hoffman, you're still not seeing that, correct? On your screen. You're just seeing
No,
the conference room.
I'm not seeing it.
There we go. Is that
There we
better?
go. That's fine.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Joe.
Sit on that slide for a minute, but how do we advance slides?
Just let me know.
Okay. So I'm David Irwin. I'm on the LGC staff. I'm a coach team manager. Been here since 2016. I'm going to talk a little bit about Spring Lake, maybe in a more positive light. Population of Spring Lake is estimated in 2019 is 12,005 people, 23.8 square miles. We assume control in 2 years, and in a week it'll be 2 years, 7/26 of 21. Spring Lake is sandwiched between the city of Fayetteville and Fort Liberty, formerly Fort Bragg. Their elected officials are 5 aldermen, 1 mayor. They're all elected for 2-year terms. So I actually did this presentation to them in March based on the February financials. At the end of February, I mean, they're learning. They're listening. Their board has an audit committee, and the audit committee started going through the reports and looking at budget actual. And they came up on the accounting fees. I wasn't there for their questions at a board meeting, but they were really questioning the amount of fees they were having to pay for contract staff. So I'm gonna go through just what I went through with them. Sharon, we accumulated kind of what had been done since July of 2021 with all the expense we have for catching them up and keeping things current. So this was the presentation. The general fund, you'll notice all the funds, the revenues are on track. Their net revenue minus expenditure was at 1.26 million. I'll go over some of the cash balance increases over time. This January is always a high water mark in terms of cash for a local government. So this was a good story. And since they had money in the bank, their interest income was far exceeding the projected budget. So those were all really good news for them. Right, next slide. So Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund, it's fairly well, just on a cash basis. Net revenue minus expenditure, almost $1 million. Stormwater is a relatively small fund there, but it had net revenue minus expenditure of $203,000. Next slide. Sanitation Enterprise Fund, doing well also. Net revenue minus expenditure of $326,000. They have a internal service fund for fleet maintenance, and it was covering all its costs and charges back to the department. So the next slide is when we get into what value does Spring Lake receive for accounting services from July 2021 till that day in March. So with myself and Tiffany Anderson of our office, I have 36 years of financial experience in government. Tiffany has 8. Then we have 2 contract accountants through Greg Isley's firm both retired finance officers. Deborah Mack, she's been a finance officer in the city of Jacksonville and in Wilmington, retired. She's really good. And Sylvia Blenson, she was a county finance officer in Harnett County and Sampson County. They're not cheap, but I think when we take over a unit like this, it's pretty large. To me, this model works best, that we use their money to hire qualified people. Because you're doing two jobs at once. You're fixing a mess from the past, and they had a real mess. We can't even audit 2021 because that's when all the funds disappeared and the records are terrible. So we're giving them a pass on that. But 2022, in the past month, we've gotten that working trial balance to where we're ready to do financial statements and get an audit done. And 2023 is a whole lot cleaner. There was a lot of cleanup done in 2020, particularly on the balance sheet, everything reconciled. So it takes experience and it takes tenacity to kind of fix the old problems and develop and implement current processes for a town of this size. Next slide. So what, day to day, what's a normal monthly workflow? About a little less than 200 checks, representing probably 3 to 4 times that many invoices. We don't do any ACH payments, everything's a check. About 80 deposits validated and reconciled, 64 purchase orders, 3,400 staff and vendor emails addressed monthly. That seems like a lot, but there's a lot of education going on. There's a lot of correction, learning. So that can kind of elevate how accounting is done across the city. We still have some credit card transactions, but not many at 13. You know, some of the online things or like registrations are still done through a credit card in a very controlled process. 241 journal entries, clear subsidiary to the general ledger posting. And we do maintain a robust periodic process. Everything is on a purchase order. Next slide. When we started in 2021, the financial foundation was what I'll call broken. So what did we do to rebuild it? So we had to work on internal controls, day one. There are 2 persons assigned to accounts payable and purchase order work so that one person can implement it, or one person can do it in the system and it gets reviewed before it's finalized. The vendor files in Spring Lake were terrible. So we had to validate all the vendors, and then we did the correct 1099 reporting, which was not done, and we redid all the W-9 forms, W-9s. We instituted, like I said, purchase orders for all purchases, and nothing gets through the purchasing process without a purchase order. The check stock was pretty deficient previously, so we got pre-printed check number stock with stubs for good descriptions, good documentation. That's just a basic control that was missing. Next slide. Cash receipts are reconciled and posted daily. I worked for the city of Raleigh for 25 years, and I had somebody check that daily because if there's a mistake, you want to know about it the next day. On 2 occasions, we called where the bank didn't credit us. We had to make a trip down to the bank and square it away. They prepared sales tax refund reports for the years 2020, 21, 22, and got back $181,036 in sales tax refund. Previously, the town paid a consultant. It's pretty common. You don't have the staff, so you pay somebody 35% of whatever comes back as the fee. We prepared and submitted a Steeps report for the outstanding years of 2015, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, so the treasurer can return that money to its rightful people. And then at one point, for 3 years, we didn't get a bill from the North Carolina Department of Information Technology for phone usage. But we weren't using the phones, but it took us about a year to prove to them that the lines were dead and they weren't in use. So we got that bill waived. That took some doing. Next slide.
Found one of those at DES for $12,000 a month that had been paid for 8 years. So
We found a lot of phone lines that just weren't being used, period. Something like that is just, when you change phone systems, you gotta stop one completely. There was an interlocal agreement in the city of Fayetteville, first annexed part of Fort Bragg. The federal government will not let a town annex part of other towns. So the county picked up on it. Spring Lake was aware of it too. They counted part of the base as their population. So for revenue sharing, like sales tax, franchise tax, Spring Lake lost some population numbers. So the agreement was that there was kind of a payment put in place to make them whole for letting Fayetteville annex that. And that had kind of been dropped by Fayetteville and Spring Lake. So picked that up and got back about $200,000. The town general fund cash recovered. When we went in about October 2021, total cash in the bank was right at $2.5 million, and it was going down. So we plugged a lot of the holes. We started making people stick to a budget, use purchase orders. January of 2022, town cash was up to about $6 million total. This past January of 2023, it was up to $8 million. That's not a great marker, because I'm a big believer. You look at the budget in action, compare your budget plan. But it did kind of show that the town had lost money because it was just walking out the door. In addition to that $8 million, the town got $3.8 million in ARPA funds, which has now been, we've done revenue recognition and absorbed that into the town's regular cash reserves, what we didn't spend. Next slide. So my conclusion to the council was that I'm a big believer in the tone at the top is very important. Elected officials have been very engaged. They've shown good leadership. They've listened. They've been very transparent. They want to do a better job. They've also recognized employees a lot. Morale in Spring Lake for the employees was pretty low. This council, which was all the members but one were new last election. And last November, the fire chief became the interim manager, Jason Williams. He's been a real instigator of just a better work ethic. He's an energizer bunny in my opinion. But he's kind of changed processes. He's got people doing their jobs and they're taking pride in their work. So we try to be examples, instill professionalism, competence, knowledge, conscientiousness, integrity, respect, appropriateness, and just confidence in what they do day to day. Next, I've got a few pictures. Once we got comfortable that we had things under control from a financial standpoint, we let them use some ARPA money to make one-time purchases. Who thinks that's a new fire truck?
that came from New York.
That truck is 10 years old. It's a ladder truck, 100-foot aerial truck. It replaces a truck that's 22, 23 years old, and then at 25 will have to be taken out of service. It was a priority for the fire department, because with that truck they can keep their lower ISO rating, which saves on homeowners insurance for citizens. And that truck is online now. It's passed all its inspections, pumping tests. That was a good find. $600,000 and new one is $1.6 million.
So he was driving the acting city manager, fire chief, was driving that back from New York. And so I called him when I thought he was going to be in Virginia. I said, "This is Governor Glenn Youngkin from the state of Virginia, and we got a report that you're driving at excess speed through our state with a fire truck that's not properly tagged or registered. He didn't know who it was. Anyway, I called this person just to thank him for the work he's doing as interim city manager and keep up the good work. And I just thought I'd play a little prank.
Where was he when you called him?
Virginia.
Oh, he really was in Virginia?
Yeah.
I thought you said he thought he'd be there, but
Yeah.
He said he knew he wasn't speeding because the fastest the truck would go was like 58 miles.
So anyway,
So one of the biggest complaints
I had a little fun with him that day.
in Spring Lake has been the holy roads. I don't mean holy religious, but holes in the roads. So they had a roller that was broken, so they bought this new roller. That trailer's really big, but the trailer is for the backhoe in the background. But once they got it, the interim manager told the streets people, said, I want you out every morning patching holes. And you know what? The citizens have noticed. The council members have come to me and said, oh, I get calls just thanking us for getting roads patched and things fixed. So they're fixing what needs to be repaired. Next. They also had some broken down lawnmowers. So these are 2 zero-turn Kubota mowers. They're about $6,500 a piece. And they're out cutting grass on the city property, medians. Citizens notice that too. I think the community is taking pride because they're making the town look better. Next. But you have to have a truck, pull a big trailer, and so they got this large dump truck for the streets department to use. Next. And that's the backhoe front end loader they got for the streets department. Replaced one that was not used. Next. But in the center there is interim manager Jason Williams, and in the background you see, I guess, 4 of the 5 council elected officials and the mayor in the center. The rest of those guys are the fire department. When Mr. Williams was assistant fire chief, he went to his fire chief and said, we need a 5-year plan. So in 5 years, I think we should build a second station. We should get some new fire trucks. We should replace the ladder truck. And we should staff the second station. And we should get better pay for our firefighters. They gave him that award because with the acquisition of the ladder truck, he actually achieved that 5-year goal within 5 years. The past chief told him that was never going to happen in Spring Lake. But these guys, they all take pride in what they're doing. I think what the treasurer always says, our office cannot care more about the community than the community cares about itself. That's not a financial thing. I can't do that. I mean, financial statements are important, don't get me wrong. They're the back. It takes a mindset. I call it kind of a culture. There is a culture change and process in Spring Lake. They listen, they're working hard. They're making tough decisions. They're transparent, and I think it's showing up. So next, I think we're just going to keep on. I'm a facilitator. We're going to keep facilitating the change. We hope to get the 22 audit in sometime this fall, and 23 following right behind, and then it may be that we can make our exit out of there shortly thereafter. They're in a much better place than they were 2 years ago when your office was down there.
Thank you, David.
Any questions?
Thanks for all your hard work and your staff. Any questions remotely?
So they're telling me the 22 audit's not done.
No, it hadn't really started. I mean, we just got the financial, we just got the trial balance reconciled to where we're comfortable with starting the financial statement. There was a lot of cleanup that got posted in
22.
22.
Those are going into 21.
So you think 23 will come on the hind legs much faster?
Yes, because we've been in there the whole year. The day-to-day is done right.
Stay consistent.
Right.
So, okay. So you feel like once you get the 21, 22 done, the 23 will follow pretty quickly because there's just not going to be that much work in 23 numbers.
Hopefully not.
David,
Hope's not a strategy.
hope's not a strategy.
All right, any questions from on virtually? Okay, thank you very much. Good job.
Great job. And I think the culture change is the biggest deal because that culture was not there when we were in there doing our investigation. And did it for some time after. So the culture change is huge. That can keep that going, the town will be successful.
Thank you all very much. Glad TBJ was there to hear some good news about Spring. So Spring Lake's not drowning this week, right, David?
They're not drowning anymore.
Anymore.
It's a new day.
It's a new day. All right.
All right, we have one last item, information item on the agenda. We had these letters in your packet last month. This is attachment H regarding the town of Elizabeth City, city of Elizabeth City, I guess. And these were letters from different citizens that we received during the month of May, expressing a great deal of concern for what's going on in Elizabeth City. We were running out of time last month and really did not give the letters the attention they deserve, so we put it back on the agenda for this month. As I said, there's, I think it's 22 different letters here from different citizens, basically saying the same thing, that they don't have confidence in their government. They're very concerned about the financial condition, the internal controls, qualifications of the staff, and how the city is going to continue to grow and move forward. Every one of these ended with, please try and help them or come take them over. A few of them were fairly emphatic about that. What I can tell you about Elizabeth City right now is we did get the 21 audit in. Work is progressing on 22. They did adopt the budget at June 30th, did not appropriate any fund balance. We were right to the wire getting that budget in, but they did get it in. They struggled putting the budget together. And they have generally been more receptive to our assistance through the last month. But I, of course, still have concerns. Still don't know what their current financial condition really is.
And my concern is that we don't wait until they're bankrupt to go in and take them over. And I haven't gone in and audited this, but people that have been there have said they don't have a finance officer that can do their job. Then had people come in and try to help and coach, and it's just can't do it. And then the leadership is not probably what it should be, according to people that have been there and worked in there. And so I don't see any way. And then there's been there is somebody that could probably go in and as a finance officer clean it up. But if you've got leadership that doesn't support that, they'll just run them out the door. So I just don't know how it can be cleaned up until the leadership changes, is my point. So I don't know that leadership will change. We've just seen a great example of leadership changes and what it can do for a local government. And I'm just not sure that waiting until they're bankrupt is the time to go in and do something when we know about the issues now. The fact that the mayor and those charged with governance might be more receptive to our suggestions if you've got leadership in there that is going to run it the way they want to run it, and you've got financial people that aren't capable or don't have the competencies to do the job, I don't know that your situation isn't just going to keep going downhill. So I guess I'm wondering why we're not going in there and taking them over and figuring out what we got before they get too far gone.
So which hurdle are they closest to knocking down that would allow that to happen?
Neither.
Well, I mean, the statutes require one of two things before we can step in. One is that they missed debt payments. To my knowledge, that has not happened. Kendra, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've not been made aware of any missed debt payments.
Well, strategy. So you can't, if you're not confident that the books have been reconciled as they've spiked the ball and told people they've been reconciled, then how would you know? How would you know that they have missed a debt?
Because the latest you have is 2021 audit, right?
Right.
And we just finished 2023. So they're 2 years behind. We have no clue where they are financially.
They are reconciled now up through June 30, 2022. There was,
but not been audited.
It's been audited yet, so there obviously could still be adjustments there. I don't know the status of 2023.
Who's doing it? This reconciliation, and yeah, I mean, I've heard bank reconciliations were done, but when you actually looked at it, it wasn't a bank reconciliation, just somebody's attempt to
that piece of it, my understanding, has been done by the staff, but then Greg Isley's folks are coming in behind that, doing the full blown.
For real? He's been hired?
He's still there. So I think as far as debt payments go, I think that somebody would have called us if they hadn't been paid. I know if they've missed any SRF payments, DEQ would have let us know, because they've done that before.
So what's the other?
The other alternative to assume control is.
No, I meant what's the other? To take them over, you said missed debt payment. What's the other one? Not knowing their financial condition. Boom, got it.
No, they have to negligent or repeated violations. 159.
Well, don't you think they're there? Negligence, violations.
They are, but so are other. Taking that stuff.
Yeah, but this one, I mean, you got 22 letters of citizens begging you to take them over. So.
I think it's something the commission's going to need to make a decision as a whole.
Is that a motion?
I can't make a motion.
No, I'm picking on you, Sharon.
And the statute does, just to be clear, it's, I think Cindy just pulled it up, but I think it's willfully or negligently fails to comply with the provisions of the chapter, and it's after notice and warning. So as we've done with other units,
I know we have to give them.
that procedure.
I know we have to give them notice. I know the process, but we haven't even started it. And even when you start the process, it's what, 60 days?
Not
There's
exactly. No, there's not.
I was thinking you had to give them time to kind of.
No.
In the past, we have. We've typically, when some of the prior units in one meeting provided that notice in the morning, asked them to respond. I believe it's been 45 days or so, or within.
Yeah.
So I would tell you that the GS 159 lays out what a finance officer should be able to do. And your finance officer there cannot do those things. So they're already severely non-compliant because finance officer is key. So they're already severely non-compliant. So I think that hurdle's done. It's just a matter of what the local government commission wants to do. And again, this is the eastern part of the state. This is a big city and it's got a university and it's all the reasons to want to prop it up and make sure it's successful. And again, just don't want to see it go down to the wire and then have to run in there and rescue it versus propping it up now. Where's the treasurer when I need him?
We can vamp. So this is.
You missed some major conversation. I got the other
major conversation.
I know, I'm sure. Or you wouldn't have left. I got I gave the other I got the other obstacle out of the way. chapter GS 159 that they're out of compliance with, severely out of compliance, they don't have a finance officer.
Oh, they have one. I mean, it tells
They
them
have
they're
one.
they have the following powers and duties.
It says in there what they should be able to do.
Yeah, it says what they're supposed to do.
And I'm telling you, she can't. All we have to do is go check it out. That's all we have to do.
Well, our staff would then want to provide you with a clean's wrong one. Correct, accurate list of the deficiencies that are either willful or negligently failing or refusing to comply with the chapter.
Just can't. Just can't. Just can't.
In several of the letters, people complained about the amount of money they're spending with Greg Isley. And they're paying
Her too.
finance staff on top of that.
So where do we move from here? We go check out the situation and make a decision, bring a report back to the commission. I'm asking.
The commission is free to plan it, or make any plan or make any procedure that you want to. If we give them notice and opportunity to be heard, and the rules allow it, the rules for enforcement of statutes give us, our rules give us a step-by-step procedure, but at the end it says we can skip any of these steps if the secretary of the commission feel there's a danger to the finances. If there's not a danger, we would skip a step. So we probably use that once, I forget.
And I guess my point is, so while the intentions might be good of some, as long as you've got accounting and financial staff that cannot do their job, and leadership that won't make that happen, you're paying them, and then you're hiring a third-party consultant and paying them a lot of money to get the books in shape and without a lot of cooperation. I just think the situation needs to be assessed and brought to the commission as to what's really going on there. I have not been in there and audited it. I mean, just released a report. I'll get ready to. I'm thinking out loud. Anyway, I think that I haven't been in there and audited that. Let me put it that way. I have not been in there and audited that piece of it. And I think an assessment needs to be made and a decision made before we let it get down to the wire and it goes on the verge of bankruptcy.
We're tasked with finding reasonable, this is Cindy again, reasonable cause exists to believe that the provisions of a particular statute have been violated.
Cindy, is that the criteria before which we can conduct a investigation?
It's not an investigation.
Well,
it's an assessment.
Well, there's another step we can take. We go back to the audit statute. Is that 34? The commission has the authority. Come on. Internet. Trying to get the exact language so I don't misquote. Seriously.
I mean, the issue seems to be that we need our own eyes and ears on the ground long enough to see get our own viewpoint on what's happening. We're getting a lot of external information. Whether it's accurate or not, we need to assess, I think, is the issue.
I mean, staff didn't spend a considerable amount of time there in October, November.
Was it the LGC staff that coached the current? Who was in there coaching and working with? And
Melissa was working directly with
Alicia to help her understand her job, show her her job, help her get confident in that job. And then
Natalie also was there working more with, Kendra, correct me again if I'm wrong, Natalie, I think, was working more with some of the other staff.
And it's my understanding that that didn't go well and
No, we cut it short because it was
going well. They
But
couldn't.
is it fair, Sharon, that we might be seeing some change in behavior? You know, because time is a dimension, right? And sounds like there's some effort, sounds like there's some effort to get the books caught up. Is it adequate? Different conversation, but it sounds like there's some effort.
Well, they're getting caught up, but they've hired a third party. They're paying their financial people, but yet they've hired somebody else to come in and do the books.
Well, that's okay. So there's two ways to understand that. One is they're paying an outsider, so that's good. They're trying to get caught up. Is it the most efficient way, or is this a way to help their existing staff get learning? That's a different conversation.
They're not teaching the existing staff.
That's an issue, and,
Yep.
and that's a separate problem. But it's a little bit like we heard Spring Lake. Okay, we've done a great job of coming in there and helping them out, getting them straight out.
The authority that I don't know that the LGC has ever formally done. And again, it's narrow, but may inquire into and investigate the internal control procedures of a local government. And that's kind of narrow, but it's something.
So if you go to the duties and responsibilities of a finance officer, either they can do them or they can't.
Well, are they being done? They might not be done well, but are they is there any failure to provide the board statement of financial condition as often as the governing board requests it?
Well, yeah,
Are they supervising the receipt and deposit of monies? Are they keeping the accounts under GAAP?
There you go. There you go. You can't even spell that.
they are given a financial report to the board that it's based on unreconciled.
Are they pre-auditing? Are they dispersing correctly? Maintaining the records correctly? Well,
In accordance with GAAP, no.
here we go, number 5. Are they well, that's about debt, sorry.
The fact that you're saying it says in accordance with GAAP, no.
Keep accounts in accordance with generally accepted principles of government.
I'm just.
Don't disagree, just throwing out options. Well, I hate to say this, but we did have the power to adopt rules around the finance officer qualifications. Got put on the back burner.
Well, that's why, but I say if you go to what the finance officer is supposed to be able to do and you assess whether or not they're doing them, get to the qualifications. It's a back door to their qualifications.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because if I can't do those things because I'm not qualified, it will show up. So it's really a back door to are they qualified or not. That's why I've not really pushed so hard on the qualifications, because all I got to do is prove they can't do these things, and I've said they're not qualified.
Have they gotten well, we don't do unit levers anymore, but are there deficiencies? Has the person been required to do the training
To clarify, are we trying to
not that that would help
Are we
necessarily.
trying to identify right now these deficiencies, or are we just looking for clarity on what the commission is directing staff to do?
I was saying that I think we need to do an assessment, because you can't take them over until they are negligently or whatever out of compliance with the law. I'm saying they're out of compliance with GS 159 in that section about what the finance officer is supposed to be able to do. I'm saying that's the end right there. And then I haven't audited that. So I think the commission needs to make an assessment of whether or not this finance officer and this city manager are accomplishing what the law says should be accomplished, and when they're not, then that's your door in for the local government commission to take them over. That's where I was trying to get to. But you can't do that without some sort of an assessment of what's going on there. The fact that they don't have their books in order, they are 2 years behind. All you got to do is check.
Right there, they're out, out of compliance.
They're out of compliance with the law. And then if you look to see, are their books reconciled to the general ledger? That is a part of what the financial officer duties are. Are the bank reconciliations done? And it is a true reconciliation that the bank's reconciled to the general ledger, not just somebody putting in canceled checks and whatever. And if you do all that, I think you'll get the assessment you need to see that she can't do the job.
This is Nancy Hoffman. We had this long conversation, a couple of months ago about the situation in Elizabeth City. It just appears to me that there are some serious issues there. And to the extent that the local government commission has whatever authority to intervene at whatever level at this point, I think we should seriously consider that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Hoffman. And if you recall, when this came up a couple of months ago, then people throw words on the table like arbitrary and capricious, and it makes me, as not being a lawyer, feel like I'm doing something wrong when all I'm trying to do is protect and defend. And so that's a little bit of the mindset we're in. And I'm sorry it's that way, but that's the truth.
Well, I think we got a point.
Okay.
We're just not taking it. We're not proving the point. And I've got it.
Well,
Yeah.
staff resources are always a consideration.
It shouldn't be. There was a solution to that on the table, and it's about to get lost. So I'm just going to point that out too. There was a solution on the table. There is somebody to go in there, but they're never going in there unless the local government commission takes them over.
Do we have enough people to adjourn?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right. Y'all get up with Alter Wood about the other issue that you want to talk about. These letters we got from Elizabeth City, are they, thank you.
Thank you.
Wood. Are they the same letters we got last time?
Yes. All the same.
Does any other LGC member have any questions about the Elizabeth City update?
I'll just say, I think Ms. Hoffman makes a good point. I don't know what you have the authority to do and all, but it does seem like there is a lot of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Philbeck. Discussion. Before we adjourn, just go around the horn to see if anybody else has anything they'd like to add today. Are we going remote this fall?
Yes, we're working on October.
Where?
We're working on app, but we have to reconnect with them.
We're working on the possibility of App State in October for our remote meeting. So I just want people to keep that in their thinking, please. Ms. Hoffman, you've attempted a couple of times to make a motion, so if you'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. Do I hear a second? Second. Second, Mr. Toole. Motion second being made. Any further discussion? And we appreciate all your participation. Without any further discussion, the clerk will call the roll.
Okay. Yes, Auditor Wood is absent, having just left. Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Harvey.
Aye.
Mr. Philbeck.
Aye.
Treasurer. All right.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.